Okay, let's be real for a second. Job interviews, those things can be brutal,
Hmm.
especially in the tech world. I mean, those effing style interviews, everyone's heard the horror stories. But you know what? What if I told you that those, quote, failed interviews, those times you walk out feeling like you totally bombed, are actually like secret weapons? Today, we're going to deep dive into how to turn those interview setbacks into, rocket fuel for your career.
Yeah, it's funny how we kind of frame it, right? We see those as failures, but they're not. Think of it as a masterclass in what not to do, and even better, what you should do next time.
Ooh, I like that. A masterclass you didn't even know you signed up for. So walk me through it. What's that first thing you do, especially after an interview, maybe when you think you messed up? Asking for a friend, of course.
Before you even think about that comfort food or whatever you do to unwind, grab a notebook. Seriously. Write down everything. Like everything while it's still fresh in your mind. The questions they asked, your responses, any coding challenges, how you approached them. It's like you're creating a treasure map to figure out where you did well and where the gaps are.
Okay, so document everything.
Yeah.
Got it. I mean, it's tempting to just want to forget about it,
Huh.
but making those notes, that turns all that raw data into something you can use, right?
Right. It's super valuable. And there's another step before you jump into like practicing more problems or whatever, and it's honest self-assessment. So look back at each question. Where were you totally confident? And where did you stumble a bit? How was your communication? Did you use the time well? And here's a big one. Pay attention to those emotions. Were you nervous, confused, frustrated? Figuring out how your emotions, how they affect how you perform, that's like the key to staying cool and collected under pressure the next time.
That's so real, though. I know for me, like when I start to get flustered, my brain just poof goes blank. Okay, so we've written down what happened, taken a good hard look at how things went. So now let's talk about those like technical challenges, the coding questions that can make or break a tech interview.
For sure. Now's a good time to revisit those coding problems, but this time without the pressure of the interview, try to solve them again. And this time, really focus on finding like the best, most efficient solution. And don't be afraid to do some research, look at different ways to solve it, and analyze um, how much time and memory each solution takes. It's not about just memorizing the answers, it's about getting the why behind the how.
I see, I see. So it's more than just getting to the right answer. It's about understanding why one approach might be better than another.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, let's say there was a question about reversing a linked list. Maybe in the interview you used iteration, which worked, but it wasn't the most elegant solution. Now you can take your time and maybe discover, oh, there's this recursive solution. And it's both simpler and faster, that aha moment that there's a better way that's pure gold.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these interviews, even the ones that didn't go perfectly, how they can be like super useful. You're basically forced to level up your understanding. But we both know technical skills are only one part of the picture, right? What about those behavioral questions that everyone seems to dread?
Ah, yes, those behavioral questions. It's a mistake to think they're not as important as the technical stuff. These questions are all about seeing your soft skills, like how you work with other people, how you handle conflict, how you deal with challenges. These are important for being successful in any role, especially in tech.
Right, right, for sure. So how do we make sure we don't just, I don't know, fumble through those questions? I have a tendency to ramble when I get nervous, which probably doesn't help.
Okay, first things first. You got to review the common behavioral questions. You know the ones, those classics? Tell me about a time you failed. Or describe a situation where you had a difficult teammate. And of course, how do you handle pressure? Those are the hits. So start thinking about specific examples from your experience, things you can use to really show your skills and personality.
So not just a generic answer, you're actually telling a story.
Yes, exactly. And to structure those stories to make them really good, remember the STAR method. It stands for situation, task, action, result. Describe the situation, explain your role, what you did, and the results you got. This framework, it keeps your answers short and sweet, and they have more impact.
I love it. It's like a cheat code for interview storytelling. Okay, so far we've documented the interview, we've taken a good look at our performance, broken down the tough technical parts, and practiced telling stories about our past experiences. So what's next?
Feedback. This is how we turn those almost made it's into wins. And if you didn't get specific feedback from the interviewer, don't be afraid to politely ask for it.
Makes sense. It's like getting directions on your career path. You might think you know the way, but having someone with experience guide you, it can be game-changing.
Absolutely. And when you get that feedback, treat it like it's super valuable. Analyze it objectively, see if there are any patterns and how it matches up with your own self-assessment. Did they point out something you didn't even think of? Were there any skills, technical or soft skills, that came up over and over? That's how you make feedback into a plan for improvement.
I like it. It's like having a coach break down your game and give you personalized advice. So using that feedback, what's the next move?
It's time to create a plan. Set specific, measurable goals for each area you want to work on, a timeline that's actually doable, and figure out resources that can help you level up. Could be books, online courses, maybe even finding a mentor in your field.
Okay, so it's about finding those weak spots
Yeah.
and then like making a plan to turn them into strengths.
Yeah.
It's great stuff. But, practically speaking, what are some resources that are out there to help us put this plan into action? There's so much online, it's hard to know where to start.
Well, that's where the beauty of the internet, with all its craziness, comes in. It's like a 247 career development center right there in your pocket. Coding platforms like LeetCode, HackerRank, and AlgoCademy, those are awesome for practicing coding challenges and getting comfortable with algorithms and data structures.
You know what it's like? It's like training for the coding Olympics. You wouldn't show up to the games without practicing your moves, right?
Exactly. And if you want a deep dive into specific concepts, those online courses are amazing. Platforms like Coursera and Udacity, they've got courses from top universities and big tech companies. And they cover, everything: algorithms, data structures, system design, even machine learning.
It's like having the world's best teachers right there on your laptop. So cool.
And then there's tech interview prep websites, places like InterviewBit and Pramp. They offer mock interviews, they have these prep paths, and you even get feedback from engineers who've been there, done that. It gives you a taste of the real deal, but in a safe environment.
It's like a dress rehearsal before the main event. Makes sense. But what about those times when you're stuck on a specific problem or just want to connect with people who are going through the same thing?
That's where the online communities are really helpful. Like Reddit forums or Carrier Questions is a good one. And Stack Overflow, obviously. They're great for connecting with other tech people, seeing what they've learned, and getting advice on stuff you're struggling with.
Yeah, I spend way too much time on Stack Overflow myself. Okay, so we've got resources for practicing coding, for learning those new concepts, even for connecting with a supportive community. But what about just like those core coding skills? How do we keep those sharp and ready for whatever an interviewer throws at us?
It really comes down to consistency. Even setting aside like 30 minutes a day to practice coding, that'll make a huge difference in how comfortable you are and how good you are at solving problems. And don't just solve the problems, go deeper. Try implementing common data structures like a binary search tree from scratch. Doing that'll really solidify your understanding of how it works inside.
Okay, so instead of just using a library, we're building the library ourselves.
That sounds intense.
It can be,
Yeah.
but it's seriously a fantastic way to really get it, Start with something like a binary search tree in Java. It's a classic data structure. And when you build it yourself, you get a whole new appreciation for how it works under the hood.
It's like understanding how a machine works, not just how to use it.
I like that.
Exactly. And one more thing. Don't forget about time and space complexity. Understanding how efficient your solutions are. That's super important. For those technical interviews, practice analyzing the Big O notation of different algorithms. That way you can explain why one solution might be better than another.
So being able to explain the why behind your code, it's just as important as the code itself.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about explanations, let's talk about clean code. Make it a habit to write code. It's clean and easy to read. Use good variable names and function names. Organize your code logically and add helpful comments.
Yeah, it's not just about making the code work. It's about making it understandable for others and for your future self, too.
Exactly. Now, as you move up in your career and start going for those senior level roles, you'll probably start seeing system design questions. They're designed to see how well you can design these big, scalable, and efficient systems, things like distributed systems.
System design. Whoa, that sounds kind of intimidating.
It can be, but it's really about using the principles you already know to solve bigger problems. Okay, let me give you a few key concepts. For example, think about load balancing. It's like having a bunch of servers share the workload, so no single server gets overloaded.
Okay, I get that. So
Yeah.
it's all about distributing the work to make things run smoothly. What else should we know about system design?
Another important concept is caching. It's like storing data that's used a lot in a place where it's easy to get to, like a temporary storage area to speed things up. When you're browsing a website, caching helps load images and other stuff faster because they're stored locally on your computer instead of having to be fetched from the server every single time.
So caching is like having a cheat sheet. for information that's used often. Makes things faster
Yeah.
and more efficient. Cool. Are there any other system design concepts that we should know?
Yeah, one more database sharding. This is where you take a big database and break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces called shards. Each shard is stored on a different server, which makes it faster to get data and process it.
It's like taking a giant library and dividing it up into specialized sections so you can find books more quickly and easily. I'm starting to see how all these system design concepts work together to build these really strong and scalable systems.
Exactly. And the best way to really understand system design is to practice, you know? Think about designing real-world systems. Like, how would you design a URL shortener or a social media newsfeed?
Those are great examples. They're things we use every day. But we probably don't think much about how they actually work behind the scenes.
Right. By working on those real-world problems, you'll understand system design principles better, and you'll learn how to explain your reasoning clearly.
So it's all about taking those theoretical concepts and actually using them. It's like actually building a city instead of just reading about urban planning.
I like that analogy. And remember, communication is just as important as technical knowledge. When it comes to system design, you need to be able to clearly explain your design choices and why you made those decisions, especially during an interview.
That makes sense. Even the most brilliant design isn't very useful if you can't communicate it effectively. So how can we get better at communicating, especially when we're talking about these complex technical topics?
Practice explaining technical concepts in a simple and clear way. Like you're talking to someone who has no technical background. Imagine you're explaining binary search trees to your grandparents. How would you break it down so they could understand?
That's a good challenge.
Okay.
It makes you think about the core of the idea. Are there any other ways to improve communication skills?
Yeah, definitely. Recording yourself doing mock interviews can be really helpful. Watch the recordings and pay attention to how you're communicating. Are you speaking clearly and getting to the point? Are you engaging with the interviewer? It can feel weird watching yourself, but it's really valuable for seeing what you can improve.
It's like watching game film to analyze your performance, right?
Exactly. And if you get nervous about public speaking, think about joining a group like Toastmasters. It's a great place to practice speaking in public, get feedback, and build your confidence.
So it's about becoming a better storyteller, both when you're explaining technical stuff
Yeah.
and when you're talking about your experiences, I see. But even with all the preparation in the world, interviews can still be scary. How can we deal with that? Interview anxiety and keep it from messing up our performance.
You're right. Interviews can be stressful, but being really prepared, that's your best weapon. The more confident you are in what you know and what you can do, the less anxious you'll feel.
It's like knowing you've trained hard for a race. You might still have some pre-race jitters, but, you're ready.
Exactly. And besides preparation, there are things you can do to calm your nerves. Things like deep breathing exercises, meditation, or even just visualizing yourself succeeding. Those can make a big difference. It's all about shifting your mindset from fear to focus.
So it's about calming that inner storm and turning that nervous energy into positive focus. What are those times when negative thoughts pop into your head, like, I'm not good enough, or I'm going to mess this up?
Don't underestimate the power of positive self-talk. Instead of focusing on those negative thoughts, replace them with affirmations. Remind yourself of your strengths, your accomplishments, and how you can handle any challenges that come up. It's about being your own cheerleader.
So it's about silencing that inner critic and boosting your confidence with positive self-talk. This is all great advice for dealing with those interview jitters. Now, we've talked about technical skills, behavioral questions, communication, anxiety management. Is there anything else we should be thinking about as we navigate the tech interview world?
There's one more thing. It's important to be patient and persistent. The job search, especially in tech, it's a lot like a roller coaster. There are going to be highs and lows, rejections and successes. The key is to just keep learning, keep getting better, and never give up on your goals.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
You'll hit bumps along the way, but getting to that finish line, it's worth it.
Exactly. Now let's think about something for a minute. Let's shift gears and consider something we haven't really talked about in this guide. What if you actively looked for stretch interviews? Interviews are, it's going to be challenging, and you might even, not do so well. Could that actually help you learn faster?
That's interesting. It's like throwing yourself in the deep end to learn how to swim better and faster.
Right. Think about it. If you only go for jobs where you feel like you're 100% qualified, you might be missing out on chances to really push yourself and get some valuable experience. What if you try those interviews for jobs that are maybe a little bit out of your reach right now? You'd be exposed to new technologies,
Yeah.
different ways of interviewing, and tougher questions. It could really help you grow.
So it's about being okay with being uncomfortable, because that's how you learn. But wouldn't that mean more rejections?
Maybe. But you have to remember, every interview, whether you get the job or not, it's a chance to learn something new. Even if you don't get the offer, you'll learn about what's happening in the industry, different company cultures, and the kinds of questions they're asking for those higher level roles.
So it's like a free masterclass
Yeah.
in advanced tech interviewing. And you might even end up getting your dream job out of it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
of course. You don't want to go crazy and apply for every single job out there.
Hmm.
But picking a few stretch interviews, it can really help you learn faster and grow your network.
It's about being smart with your job search and seeing every interview, even the ones that feel a bit scary, as an investment in your future.
I like that.
Okay, we've talked about so much in this deep dive. Everything from breaking down those technical challenges to building your own brand to even going for those stretch interviews to help us learn and grow.
It's all about changing how we see interviews. Instead of thinking of them as pass or fail tests, we should see them as valuable learning experiences, whether we get the job or not.
It's like taking those interview lemons and turning them into career lemonade.
Right. So, as we wrap up this episode, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
Here's the thing. Every interview, it doesn't matter if you get the job or not. It's a chance to grow, to learn, and to get better. Take those opportunities. Really think about how you did. Ask for feedback. And use what you learn to level up your skills and get closer to your dream career.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
So true.
Now, before we go, let's leave our listeners with a question to think about. Something we didn't really cover. In the material we looked at, what if we tried to get feedback before we even start interviewing? Could that help us see where we need to improve and get even better?
That's a great question. What if you reached out to mentors, colleagues, or even people who interviewed you before and asked them for honest feedback on your resume, your technical skills, or even how you interview before you even start applying for jobs? It'd be like getting a scouting report on yourself before the game. You could see where you might need to focus your practice. It's about being proactive with your career. Ask for guidance and feedback to make sure you're showing your best self. When those interview chances come up, I'd love that.
Me too.
Well, that's it for our deep dive today, all about turning those interviews that didn't go so well into something that can really help your career. We hope you found it helpful and maybe even a little fun. Don't forget to share your thoughts, any aha moments, or even your own stories about how you turn those interview setbacks into wins. We love hearing from you guys. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.